this video, we're going to walk through the OF-306, which is one of the first forms of the background investigation process. This video will be for anyone that's interested in the background investigation or those that have recently received a tentative offer and may currently be going through the background investigation. Before we get started, you could help out by liking this video to help with the YouTube algorithm. Also subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of all the new videos that are uploaded, and share with anyone that could use this information. In order to go over the 306, first we need to go find the form. So the form is on opm.gov/forms. This webpage has a lot of federal forms that you can go through. But on the left, it shows which types of forms there are. And this one is an OF, which stands for optional form. Then you have the 306, which is Declaration for Federal Employment. When we open that, we're going to go through the form itself. If you need help with the entire hiring process from start to finish, check out our book, Federal Hiring Advice, Your Guide to Government Jobs, available on Amazon. The link to purchase is in the description below. Now this form is one of the first forms that you receive when you get your tentative offer, because it's the start of a lot of processes. It has a lot of your personal information, and then it has your background history that you're going to self-disclose. So when we scroll down to page 2, we're going to see the first few sections are pretty self-explanatory. You've got your personal identifiable information, so your name, your social security number, your place of birth, whether or not you're a citizen, your date of birth, other names. So if you married or changed your name for any reason, you would have to put those previous names here, and then your contact information. Then selective service registration is if you were a male and you were born after 1959, then you would disclose whether or not you have registered. You must register for selective service to be eligible for federal employment. If you did not select or you have a waiver, then that's something that you would have to go through and provide proof that you have an approved waiver to be considered. And then military service would be any military veteran. You would select whether or not you had service, what branch, from what dates, and your type of discharge. The type of discharge is going to be, whether it was honorable, other, or dishonorable. And the only discharge that is unemployable is a dishonorable discharge, or general under dishonorable conditions, something along those lines. If it's an other, if it's a general under honorable, those are all generally okay. So after the military service, now we're going to work on the background information section. This is the section that gives people the most problems. So you'll read the instructions clearly so that you can make sure you're answering everything completely and accurately and honestly as possible. And it will tell you right here for questions 9, 10, and 11, they should include convictions resulting from plea of nolo contendere, no contest, but you would be able to omit any traffic fine of $300 or less. So if you had a speeding ticket that was more than $300, you would have to list that. Any violation of law committed before your 16th birthday, you can omit. Any violation of law committed before your 18th birthday, if you decided in juvenile court and you were tried as a minor, or any conviction set aside under Youth Corrections Act similar to the state law, and any conviction in which the record was expunged under federal or state law. So any of those 1 through 5 you can omit. But if it doesn't fall under that category, then you need to disclose it. And that's where these questions start. And it's very important that you are honest, even if you're not sure whether or not it's going to show up on a background investigation, you would want to disclose that. And the reason being is that these questions directly relate and correspond to your EQIP or EAP form. So these questions are the same questions that show up there as well. And if you answer yes here and answer no on that form, or vice versa, it shows a red flag. And for every question, if you answer yes, there's a box 16 where you get to explain your response. So just because you had something happen or that you had to answer yes to any of these questions doesn't mean it's automatically disqualifying. So that's the other case. So if you don't disclose it and it's found later, it could be automatically disqualifying. But if you disclose it first and it's confirmed, then you were honest and it shows, that you built a little bit level of trust, so you could potentially move forward. And having any kind of background issue is not automatically disqualifying. It all depends on what the situation is, what the charges are, what your job is. There are a lot of factors. And the adjudicator, when they receive the results, will go through and determine whether or not you're going to be able to move forward in the investigation process. But now we're going to go through them one at a time. So for number 9, during the last 7 years, have you been convicted, imprisoned, on probation, or on parole? And it tells you it includes felonies, firearms, or explosive violations, misdemeanors, and all other offenses that did not fall under these omission categories. And then it tells you here, if the answer is yes, then in 16 you have to provide the date, an explanation, where it occurred, and the name and address of the police department or court involved. Then we go to number 10. Have you been convicted by a military court-martial in the past 7 years? And if you have no military service, you would answer no, because court-martial is essentially the military version of court. And so that's where you would, if you violated some kind of military law and you fell under the UCMJ, then they could take you to court-martial and then you'd be disciplined there, reduced in rank, all kinds of items. But that's what you would list here and explain it in box 16. And it tells you again what to add: the date, the explanation, where it occurred, and the name and address of the military authority or court involved. Now number 11, this one's going to be the one that catches a lot of people. So are you currently under charges for any violation? This is going to be, have you been arrested, but you haven't officially been convicted yet, potentially. These would be things that you would check yes to, and you would explain it. What date, so when it happened, explanation of what happened, where did it happen, and the name and address of the police department or court involved. Then in the last 5 years, this one also is going to catch people. Were you fired from a job for any reason? Did you quit after being told that you would be fired? Did you leave by mutual agreement because of specific problems? Or were you debarred from federal service by OPM? So this one's important because there's a lot of times where an employee may come to an agreement with their employer or their supervisor that says, if you just resign, we won't fire you. You would still need to list that here, because what's going to happen is you have to list your full employment history on your eQuip or eApp, and if you list that as not being fired and they contact that employer and they show on record, yes, this person was, had pending disciplinary action or they were fired, and this question here doesn't line up with your eQuip or eApp, that's a red flag. So that could be potentially disqualifying. So you want to be completely honest in this box and explain everything. So it says use 16 to explain the date, what the issue was, the reason why you left, and the employer's name and address. They will contact that employer, so don't hesitate to explain and be honest. Now 13, this one I get a lot of questions about. Are you delinquent on any federal debt? And it explains what that could be. So if it's going to be your federal taxes or loans or any overpayment of benefits or any other debts to the federal government, defaults on federally guaranteed or insured loans such as student loans and home mortgage loans. So you would want to answer yes if that's the case. So, if you owe back taxes or if you're in default on your student loans, you would want to explain all that. And it's not automatically disqualifying. You're going to follow these examples, the type, length, and amount of the delinquency or default, and the steps you're taking to correct the error or repay the debt. So if you're delinquent on these debts, they're going to want to know if you've made any steps to become current. And if you have and you set up repayment plans, then you're going to list all that. And the more progress that you've made towards trying to repay those debts, even if you're still delinquent, that's going to be in your favor. So you want to have all the proof available that yes, you may have federal debt, but you are making progress towards becoming current or completing paying off that debt. Now we're in 14. Do any of your relatives work for the agency or government organization to which you are submitting this form? And it has all kinds of examples. This one is just, they're trying to look for nepotism. They just need to make sure that you're not going to be working for any of your relatives, because that's not allowed. So you would just put yes or no. If it's yes, then explain what it asks here: the name, your relationship, what department or agency or branch that they work for. So number 15, do you receive or have you ever applied for retirement pay, pension, or other retired pay based on military, federal civilian, or District of Columbia government service? So this one's going to be whether you retired from the military, maybe you already retired from federal civilian service and you're going to be a re-employed annuitant. That would be a yes or a no. And then it doesn't show that you would explain it here, but I would just add that just to be safe and make sure everything's covered. And now in 16, this is where anything that you answered yes to, you're going to have to explain. So I would read this caption. I would read under each question that you have to explain, because it tells you what to add. And it just says to make sure that you are clear, that you identify any additional pages that you need, that you have the proper identification on there, so that you can make sure everything's covered, that it's easy to read, and that if there's any questions, you can always reach out to your HR POC. So the person that sent you the form, you can ask them any questions. And then at the bottom, this gets a little confusing because there's an applicant signature and there's an appointee signature. So at this time, you're an applicant. And then what will happen is when you're in orientation, they will give you the form back to sign a second time. At that time, you'll be the appointee. So you're continuing to affirm that everything that you said on this form is still correct between the time that you're an applicant and the time you're an appointee. And then the section at the bottom, most people can ignore. This is to explain if you've ever been a federal employee before, then you would have yes or no, the dates, and it has to do with life insurance. So did you waive life insurance? Yes, no, or you don't know? The reason why this is important is because if you waived life insurance in the past, there's the potential that you cannot get it reinstated on your new appointment unless you had a long enough break in service or you had a qualifying life event. So to summarize everything, we covered the 306. This is one of the very first forms that you get whenever you receive your tentative offer, because it's the start of everything. So you'll have just a few days to fill it out and return it. It's going to have all your personal information so that you can have HR to fill in all of your other pre-employment documents, to schedule your appointments, everything like that. And then it also helps to start your eQuip or eApp because the information on the 306 is required to build that profile. You'll want to go through the form and clearly answer every question, whether yes or no that it applies. And if you ever select yes, you need to explain it in block 16 with all the information that's listed under each question. It tells you exactly what to put in box 16. You want to be as completely honest as possible. So even if you're not sure, I would default on exposing it, explaining it. That way there's no questions at the end. Whether you miss something and they catch it later and now your integrity is in question, you want to be sure that even if you're on the fence, it's better to disclose something and explain it, because then they'll discuss it with you as part of the investigation process. And if you disclose something that wasn't necessary, they'll just discount that. And don't ever be afraid to disclose because you think something will automatically disqualify you. There's very few situations that are automatically disqualifying. Everything that gets pulled, you know, your responses to the 306, your resume, your fingerprint results, your EQIP or EAP results, all of that goes to an adjudicator. And they go through, they review everything, and they make a decision. And even if you have some issues with your background, it may not automatically disqualify you. And if it does, they'll let you know at that part of the process. I would always let the adjudicator be the one to decide whether or not you're going to be eligible. Don't decide that on your own and miss out on an opportunity because you may be a little bit too critical on your own history. You need to let them tell you whether or not you're going to qualify. Thank you for watching the video. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. If you need to work one-on-one, you can visit the website at www.federalhiringadvice.com and we can schedule a time to meet.